She thought she was untouchable. She thought the badge on her uniform gave her the right to judge, to belittle, and to hurt. Sapphira Miller, a senior attendant for SkyWings, looked at a 7-year-old boy and saw nothing but a nuisance. She looked at his father, a quiet black man in a hoodie, and saw a target she could bully. But when she shoved that cart, when she heard the sickening crack of a child's tooth snapping against the metal, she didn't just break a bone. She broke her own life. She didn't know that the man she was threatening to arrest wasn't just a passenger. He was the man who could turn the lights off at SkyWings with a single phone call. This is the story of how one act of cruelty led to the most satisfying, brutal karma in aviation history. The fluorescent lights of JFK International Airport hummed with the manic energy of the holiday rush. Gate B14 was a chaotic sea of frustrated travelers, overpacked carry-ons, and the distinct smell of stale coffee and anxiety. But for Sapphira Miller, standing behind the pristine podium of the SkyWings first-class lane, the chaos was something to be sneered at. Sapphira adjusted her silk scarf, her manicured fingers smoothing out a non-existent wrinkle in her navy blue uniform. At 34, Sapphira considered herself the queen of the cabin. She wasn't just a flight attendant. In her mind, she was a gatekeeper. She decided who was treated like royalty and who was treated like cargo. "Next," she barked, not bothering to look up from her manifest. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped forward. He was black, wearing a charcoal grey hoodie, loose-fitting joggers, and a pair of worn-in sneakers. Holding his hand was a small boy, maybe 7 years old, with wide, curious eyes and a small backpack shaped like a rocket ship. Sapphira looked up, her lip curling slightly. She scanned the man up and down. No suit, no tie, no visible Rolex, just a hoodie that looked like it had been through the wash a few too many times. "Sir, the economy boarding lane is to your left," Sapphira said, her voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet condescension she had perfected over a decade. She pointed a long, red-nailed finger toward the mass of people huddled in Zone 4. "This is for first class and Diamond Medallion members only." The man, Michael, didn't flinch. His expression was calm, almost bored. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. He simply held out 2 boarding passes. "We're in the right place," Michael said softly. "Seats 1A and 1B. Sapphira snatched the tickets from his hand, fully expecting them to be fakes, or perhaps an error. She scanned them, hoping for the angry red beep of rejection. Beep. Green light. Sapphira's eyes narrowed. Thorn, Michael, Thorn, Leo, full fare, first class. Not an upgrade, not frequent flyer points, cash tickets. Probably a rapper, she muttered under her breath, loud enough for her colleague Jessica to hear, but quiet enough to claim plausible deniability. She thrust the tickets back at him. She didn't smile. She didn't say, "Enjoy your flight." "Boarding is through the jet bridge," she said dismissively, turning her attention immediately to the older white man in a suit behind Michael. "Oh, Mr. Vanderbilt, so good to see you again. Please come right through." Michael took his son's hand. "Come on, Leo. Let's go see the plane." "Daddy, was that lady mad at us?" Leo whispered, clutching his rocket ship backpack. "No, son," Michael said, his voice level, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Some people just have a hard time seeing clearly. Don't let it worry you." As they walked down the jet bridge, Sapphira watched them go, a burning irritation flaring in her chest. She hated it when people who didn't look the part invaded her sanctuary. She had spent years curating an atmosphere of exclusivity in her cabin. She wanted senators, CEOs, and old money. She didn't want hoodies and sneakers. "I've got the galley on this one," Sapphira told Jessica, grabbing her tablet. I'm going to make sure everything is orderly." Jessica looked worried. "Sapphira, chill out. It's a 6-hour flight to London. Don't start anything." "I don't start things, Jessica," Sapphira snapped, checking her reflection in the glass. "I finish them." Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was plush and quiet. Michael helped Leo settle into the wide leather seat of 1B. He adjusted the boy's seatbelt and pulled out a coloring book. "Can I have apple juice, Dad?" Leo asked. "Once we're in the air, buddy," Michael smiled. Sapphira stomped into the cabin, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. She saw Michael placing his duffel bag in the overhead bin. It was a generic black bag, but she noticed he handled it with care. "Excuse me," Sapphira said, pushing past him to get to the galley, purposely bumping his shoulder. "You need to sit down. We are pushing back." "There's plenty of time," Michael said, easily stowing the bag. "And you could say excuse me without the contact." Sapphira spun around. The cabin was mostly empty still, save for Mr. Vanderbilt in 2A, who was already asleep. "Sir, are you going to be a problem on this flight? Because I can have the gate agent remove you before the doors close. I don't tolerate aggression." Michael stared at her. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. It was heavy. "I'm sitting down," Michael said, sliding into seat 1A. "Do your job." Sapphira seethed. She went into the galley, ripping open bags of pretzels with violent force. She was already writing the narrative in her head. Disruptive passenger, aggressive behavior, refused crew instructions. She would file the report the second they landed. She wanted him blacklisted. But she had no idea that the disruptive passenger in 1A had just sent a text message. It wasn't to a friend. It wasn't to a wife. It was to the personal number of Alexander Henderson, the CEO of SkyWings Global. The text read, "Reviewing the new interior on Flight 492. Staff seems tense. We'll see how the service holds up." 2 hours into the flight, the cabin was dark. Most passengers were sleeping. The drone of the engines was a hypnotic hum. Leo was awake. He was bored. 7-year-olds didn't do well with 6 hours of stillness, even in first class. He had dropped his favorite red crayon, and it had rolled out into the aisle, resting near the curtain that separated the galley from the cabin. "Dad?" Leo whispered. Michael was asleep, his noise-cancelling headphones on, eyes covered by a sleep mask. Leo unbuckled his seatbelt. He was a good kid, quiet and polite. He just wanted his crayon. He slipped out of the oversized seat and tiptoed into the aisle. He crouched down, reaching for the red wax stick. At that exact moment, Sapphira Miller was in a rage. She had just spilled hot coffee on her hand in the galley and was cursing the turbulence. She kicked the brake off the heavy metal service cart, intending to shove it to the other side of the galley to clean up the mess. She didn't look down. She didn't check the aisle. She just shoved the 100-pound steel cart with all her frustration. "Move!" she hissed at nobody in particular, launching the cart through the curtain. Crack. It wasn't a soft thud. It was the sound of metal colliding with bone. "Oh! Poo-ooh!" The scream pierced the silence of the cabin like a siren. Leo had been rising up just as the cart came flying through the curtain. The metal corner of the cart caught him directly in the mouth. The force knocked the 70-pound boy backward. He hit the floor hard, curling into a ball. Michael tore off his mask and headphones instantly. He was out of his seat before the echo of the scream died down. "Leo!" Michael fell to his knees beside his son. Leo was shaking, his hands covering his mouth. Blood was already seeping through his small fingers, dripping onto his rocket ship t-shirt. Let me see, Michael said, his voice trembling with panic but trying to stay calm for his son. He gently pulled Leo's hands away. The sight made Michael's stomach turn. Leo's front tooth, one of his permanent adult teeth that had just come in, was snapped cleanly in half. The nerve was exposed. The gum was a mess of blood. "My tooth! It hurts! Daddy, it hurts!" Leo wailed, the sound garbled by the blood and the gap in his mouth. Michael looked up. Sapphira was standing over them. She wasn't holding a first aid kit. She wasn't apologizing. She was looking at the blood on the carpet with a look of pure disgust. "What did you do?" Michael roared, the calm father vanishing, replaced by a protector. Sapphira panicked. Her mind raced. She saw Mr. Vanderbilt waking up. She saw other passengers peering over their seats. She needed to control the narrative now. "He was running!" Sapphira shouted, her voice shrill. "I told him to sit down. He was running in the aisles and he ran right into the cart. It's not my fault you can't control your child." Michael stood up, towering over her. "You shoved the cart. I saw the curtain move. You didn't even look." "Back away from me," Sapphira yelled, stepping back and putting her hand up dramatically. "You are being aggressive. I am a flight crew member. Do not touch me." "I didn't touch you," Michael said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. "I'm tending to my son. Get the first aid kit, now." "Sit down, sir," Sapphira screamed. She grabbed the cabin phone. Captain, I have a code red in first class. Passenger in 1A has assaulted me, and his child is injured due to negligence. I need security on standby for landing. He's out of control." The gaslighting was immediate. She was painting a picture of a violent man and an unruly child. Michael looked at her, stunned. He looked down at Leo, who was sobbing into his shoulder, bleeding. He realized in that moment that arguing with her was useless. She was doubling down. She was going to ruin him to save her job. "You're lying," Michael said, "and you have no idea what you've just done." "I know exactly what I've done," Sapphira sneered, finally handing him a small bag of ice, tossing it at his chest rather than handing it to him. "I've just ensured you're going to jail the second we touch down. Now sit down and shut that kid up, or I'll have the pilot divert this plane and drop you in Iceland." Michael applied the ice to Leo's lip, whispering soothing words to his son. "It's okay, Leo. Daddy's got you. We're going to fix it." He looked at Sapphira one last time. She was smirking, feeling powerful, feeling like she had won. She thought he was just a nobody in a hoodie who couldn't afford a lawyer good enough to fight SkyWings' legal team. Michael pulled his phone out again. He didn't text this time. He opened an app that very few people in the world had access to. It was the direct board oversight interface for SkyWings Global Holdings. He found the employee roster for Flight 40922. He tapped on Miller, Sapphira. He took a photo of Leo's broken tooth. He took a photo of Sapphira standing there with her arms crossed, smirking. He hit send. Then he looked at Sapphira. "You want to call the police? Good. Make sure they bring the chief. They're going to need him." Sapphira laughed. "You think you're important? You're in 1A, honey. You don't own the plane." Michael didn't reply. He just held his bleeding son and waited. The turbulence was over, but the storm was just beginning. The remaining 4 hours of Flight 492 were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The cabin, usually a sanctuary of rest, had transformed into a cage. Sapphira Miller did not retreat to the galley to hide. She knew that in situations like this, the victor was usually the one who spoke first and loudest. She needed allies, and she needed them fast. Her first target was the cockpit. She picked up the interphone, buzzing the flight deck. "Captain, it's Sapphira. I need to come in. We have a situation that is escalating." The heavy, reinforced door clicked open. Captain Dave Kowalski, a veteran pilot who just wanted to get to his layover hotel and a pint of beer, looked over his shoulder. "What's the problem, Sapphira? I heard screaming." "It's 1A, Sapphira said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. She pressed a hand to her chest, feigning hyperventilation. "He's unstable, Dave. The child was running wild, completely out of control. And when I tried to secure the cabin for turbulence, the boy ran into the cart. Now the father is threatening me. He said he's going to ruin me. He's taking pictures of the crew. I feel unsafe." Captain Kowalski frowned, his brow furrowing. "Did he touch you?" Sapphira hesitated for a microsecond, just long enough to weigh the risk. "He shoved past me earlier, and he lunged at me when the boy fell. If I hadn't stepped back, I don't know what he would have done." "Christ," Kowalski muttered. He grabbed the radio. "London Tower, this is SkyWings 492. We have a level 2 disturbance on board. Requesting law enforcement to meet the aircraft at the gate. Yes, assault on a crew member." Sapphira smiled internally. Step 1 complete. The official record now stated she was the victim. She returned to the cabin, her demeanor shifting from victim to authoritarian. She walked past row 1, pointedly ignoring Michael and the sobbing child, and knelt beside Mr. Vanderbilt in 2A. "Mr. Vanderbilt," she cooed, her hand resting gently on his arm. "I am so terribly sorry for the commotion. I know how much you value your rest." Vanderbilt blinked, groggy. "Is the boy all right? It sounded nasty." "It was an accident, but the father—" Sapphira lowered her voice, leaning in conspiratorially. "He's becoming very aggressive. He's blaming us because he wasn't watching his child. I'm writing up the incident report now. If the police ask, would you mind just confirming that the boy was out of his seat? That's all we need." Vanderbilt, a man who disliked conflict and instinctively trusted uniforms, nodded slowly. "Well, yes. I suppose he was out of his seat. I saw him in the aisle." "Thank you, sir," Sapphira said, relieved. "It's just for our safety. You know how people get these days. Always looking for a lawsuit." She had him. She had the captain. She had the witness. The only loose end was Jessica. Sapphira cornered the junior flight attendant in the rear galley. Jessica was pale, shaking slightly as she prepared coffee. She had seen the cart hit Leo. She knew Sapphira had kicked the brake off without looking. "Jessica," Sapphira said, her voice sharp as a whip. "Sapphira, his tooth is snapped in half," Jessica whispered, tears in her eyes. "He's just a little kid. We need to help him. We should page for a doctor." "No doctor," Sapphira snapped. "If we page a doctor, we admit liability. Listen to me very closely." She stepped forward, invading Jessica's personal space. "You are on probation, aren't you? 6 months left?" Jessica nodded. "If this goes sideways, if they think this was crew negligence, we both go down. But I have union tenure. You don't. If you say I shoved that cart, I will testify that you left it unsecured. I will say you were the one who forgot the brake. Who do you think they'll believe? The senior attendant with 15 years of service, or the rookie?" Jessica's lip trembled. She looked at the floor. "We stick to the story," Sapphira hissed. "The kid ran. The dad got aggressive. We felt threatened. Nod if you understand." Jessica squeezed her eyes shut. She thought about her rent, her student loans, her dream of seeing the world. She nodded. "Good girl," Sapphira said, patting her cheek. "Now go give Mr. Vanderbilt a free bourbon." Back in seat 1A, the atmosphere was entirely different. It wasn't frantic. It was coldly silent. Michael had managed to stop the bleeding with the ice pack. Leo was curled up in his father's lap, exhausted from crying, clutching his rocket ship. "My mouth feels funny," Leo mumbled. "I know, buddy," Michael whispered, stroking his son's head. "The dentist is going to fix it as soon as we land. You're a brave soldier." Michael wasn't looking at Sapphira. He wasn't looking at the other passengers. He was looking at his phone screen. He had received a reply. Message from A. Henderson, CEO. I am looking at the photo. I am looking at the roster. I'm currently on the golf course with the Minister of Transport, but I'm leaving now. Tell me exactly what you want done. Michael typed back with his thumb, his face illuminated by the blue light. I want the procedure followed to the letter. Do not intervene yet. Let the police board. Let her file her report. I want her to put her name on the lie. If she changes her story, she gets fired. If she lies to the police, she goes to prison. Let's see which path she chooses. He hit send. Then he put his phone away and looked out the window at the dark Atlantic Ocean below. Sapphira walked by again, checking seat belts for the descent. She paused at 1A. Put your seat upright, she commanded. And put the bag away. Michael didn't look at her. He pressed the button, raising the seat. I hope you have a lawyer, Sapphira taunted, unable to help herself. Assaulting a flight crew member is a federal offense. You'll be lucky if you ever fly again. Michael finally turned his head. His eyes were devoid of anger. They held something far worse, pity. Sapphira Miller, Michael said, reading her name tag out loud. Employee number 429-2001, hired 2009, base JFK. Sapphira froze. How do you know my employee number? You'd be amazed what you can find when you know where to look, Michael said calmly. You have 30 minutes before we land. I suggest you use them to pray. You're crazy, Sapphira scoffed, though a cold shiver traced its way down her spine. She turned on her heel and marched away. He's bluffing, she told herself. Just another angry nobody trying to scare me. The wheels of the massive Boeing 777 kissed the tarmac at Heathrow Airport. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing the giant metal bird, but the atmosphere inside the cabin was heavier than the G-force. Usually, when a plane lands, there is the click-clack of seatbelts unbuckling and the rush to get bags. Not this time. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated, Captain Kowalski's voice came over the intercom. It was grave. We have authorities meeting the aircraft. No one is to stand up until instructed. A murmur of confusion rippled through economy. In first class, everyone looked at row 1. Sapphira stood at the front of the cabin, arms crossed, chin high. She made a show of looking fearful, glancing nervously at Michael, playing to her audience. She wanted everyone to see the dangerous man she had subdued. The cabin door opened. The cool London air rushed in. 2 British police officers, bobbies in high-visibility jackets, stepped onto the plane. They were followed by a man in a sharp suit, SkyWings station manager for Heathrow, a man named Mr. Thompson. Sapphira stepped forward immediately. Officers, thank God you're here, she said, her voice trembling perfectly. She pointed a shaking finger at Michael. That man. Seat 1A, he assaulted me and has been making threats against the crew for the last 4 hours. We were terrified. The lead officer, a tall man with a stern face, looked at Sapphira, then at Michael. Is this the individual? Yes, Sapphira said. I want to press charges immediately, and I want him removed. The officer nodded and walked down the aisle. The cabin was silent. Every eye was glued to the scene. Sir, the officer said, stopping at row 1. Could you please stand up? Michael unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up slowly, careful not to jostle the sleeping Leo. Step out into the aisle, please, the officer instructed. Michael stepped out. He was tall, significantly taller than Sapphira. In his hoodie and joggers, he looked like a stark contrast to the uniforms around him. You are being detained regarding an incident aboard this aircraft, the officer said. Please turn around. Sapphira watched with glee. This was it, the humiliation, the handcuffs. She caught Mr. Vanderbilt's eye and gave a small, sad nod, as if to say, it's a shame it had to come to this. But then, The man in the suit, Mr. Thompson, the station manager, stepped forward. He looked pale. He was holding a tablet, and his hands were shaking. He looked at the police officer, then at Sapphira, and finally at Michael. "Officer, wait," Thompson said, his voice cracking. "Stay out of this, Gary," Sapphira snapped. "This is a police matter." "Sapphira, shut up," Thompson hissed, causing Sapphira to recoil in shock. Thompson walked up to Michael. He didn't look at him with suspicion. He looked at him with terror. Mr. Thorne?" Thompson asked, looking at the manifesto on his tablet, then at Michael's face. "Yes," Michael replied calmly. Thompson swallowed hard. "Sir, I just received a call from headquarters, from the Global Board of Directors." Sapphira frowned. Headquarters? Why would they call about a passenger disturbance? "They told me to deliver a message to you personally," Thompson continued, sweat beading on his forehead. They said, the asset transfer is complete." Michael nodded once. "Good." Sapphira let out a confused laugh. "Gary, what is going on? Arrest him. He broke the rules." Michael turned to the police officer. "Officer, before you put those cuffs on me, I'd like you to look at something. It might change the nature of your investigation." "I'm not interested in your excuses," the officer said, though he paused, sensing the shift in the room. "It's not an excuse," Michael said. "It's a video." "A video?" Sapphira's blood went cold. "There's no video. Nobody was recording." "You weren't," Michael said. He pointed to the ceiling of the cabin, right above the cockpit door. But the new SkyWings 777-300ER retrofit includes cabin safety monitoring cameras. They were installed last month. I know because I signed the invoice for them. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Sapphira looked up. There, barely visible in the paneling, was a tiny black dome. "That feed goes directly to the cockpit and the cloud," Michael said. "Captain Kowalski?" He raised his voice slightly, looking toward the open cockpit door. The captain stepped out, looking confused. "Captain," Michael said, his voice ringing with authority. "Access the cabin surveillance feed for 40 hours GMT. Replay it on the main cabin monitors. Now, I can't do that, sir. That's against protocol," the captain stammered. "Who are you?" Michael reached into his hoodie pocket. The police officer tensed a hand on his taser. But Michael didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a black titanium card. It wasn't a credit card. It was an ID badge. It had the SkyWings logo, but instead of crew or pilot, it had a single word embossed in gold. "Chairman." "My name is Michael Thorne," he said, his voice projecting to the back of the plane. "I am the managing partner of Obsidian Capital. As of last Friday, my firm acquired a 51% controlling stake in SkyWings Global. I own this airline, I own this plane, and I certainly own that video feed." Sapphira Miller stopped breathing. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. Her knees buckled, and she had to grab the seatback of 2A to stay upright. "Captain," Michael said, his voice like ice, "play the tape." Captain Kowalski, realizing that his pension was suddenly hanging by a thread, scrambled back into the cockpit. A moment later, the large LCD screens at the front of the first-class cabin flickered to life. The grainy but clear footage showed everything. It showed the quiet cabin. It showed Leo, small and harmless, looking for his crayon. It showed Sapphira in the galley. It showed her rage. It showed her looking at the cart. It showed her kicking the brake. It showed her shoving it with full force, blindly, through the curtain. It showed the brutal impact. And most damning of all, it showed the aftermath. It showed Michael tending to his son while Sapphira stood there, arms crossed, not helping, not calling a doctor, but screaming and pointing fingers. The video ended. The screen went black. The police officer slowly took his hand off his taser. He turned to Sapphira. The look on his face had changed from professional courtesy to disgust. "Ms. Miller," the officer said. Sapphira couldn't speak. She was shaking violently. It looks worse than it was. I didn't mean..." "Mr. Thorne," the officer said, turning to Michael. "I believe we have been misinformed about the victim in this case." "Yes," Michael said. He looked at Sapphira. "You wanted the police, Sapphira. You wanted a report filed. You wanted strict adherence to the law." Michael took a step closer to her. She shrank back, terrified. "You broke my son's tooth," Michael whispered. "You refused him medical aid. You conspired with your colleague to falsify a federal incident report, and you tried to have me arrested to cover your incompetence." He turned to the station manager. "Gary." "Yes, Mr. Thorne?" Gary squeaked. "Fire her," Michael said. "Effective immediately. Cause: gross misconduct, assault on a passenger, and falsifying corporate records. Strip her of her flight benefits. Cancel her pension. And Gary?" "Yes, sir?" "Ensure that she does not leave this airport as a crew member. She leaves as a civilian. If she wants to get back to New York, she can buy a ticket like everyone else. Economy. Middle seat." Michael picked up Leo, who was watching with wide eyes. "Officer," Michael said to the bobby, "I would like to file charges for assault causing bodily harm against Ms. Miller, and I have the video evidence to back it up." The officer pulled out his handcuffs. This time, he didn't look at Michael. He looked at Sapphira. "Sapphira Miller," the officer said, spinning her around. "You are under arrest." As the cold steel clicked around Sapphira's wrists, the same wrists she had checked for wrinkles earlier that day, she looked at Mr. Vanderbilt. He looked away. She looked at Jessica. Jessica was crying, but she didn't say a word. "Move," the officer said. They marched Sapphira Miller down the jet bridge, past the first-class passengers she had worshipped, past the colleagues she had bullied. Michael stood at the door, holding his son. He watched her go. "Daddy," Leo whispered. "Is the bad lady gone?" "Yeah, Leo," Michael said, kissing his forehead. "She's gone. Come on, let's go find a dentist. The best one in London." But the nightmare for Sapphira Miller wasn't over. It was just beginning, because Michael Thorne wasn't done. He didn't just want her fired. He wanted to make sure she served as an example to the entire industry. The holding cell at the Heathrow police station was a stark contrast to the first-class cabin Sapphira Miller was used to. It smelled of bleach and damp concrete. There were no hot towels here. There was no champagne. Sapphira sat on the hard wooden bench, her navy blue uniform rumpled, her mascara running down her cheeks. She was still in a state of denial. "This is a misunderstanding," she told herself. "I am a senior crew member. The union will fix this. The union always fixes this." When the door buzzed open, she expected a lawyer. Instead, a police officer handed her a phone. "You have 5 minutes. Make it count." Sapphira's fingers trembled as she dialed the emergency number for the flight attendants' union. She knew the number by heart. It was the number she called whenever she wanted to complain about scheduling or overtime. "This is Mike O'Connell, District Rep," a gruff voice answered. "Mike, it's Sapphira Miller," she gasped, clutching the phone. "Thank God. You have to get down here. They arrested me. A passenger. Some rich guy who says he bought the airline. He set me up. He has a fake video. They're charging me with assault." There was a long silence on the other end. "Mike?" "Sapphira," Mike said, his voice unusually cold. "I've seen the video." Sapphira froze. "What? How?" It was emailed to the entire board of directors and the union leadership about 20 minutes ago, Mike said, from the office of Michael Thorne. It's edited, Sapphira screamed. He made it look bad. Sapphira, stop, Mike snapped. I've known you for 10 years. I've cleaned up your messes before. I got you out of that complaint in 2018 when you poured water on that passenger. But this? I saw you kick the brake. I saw you shove that cart. That wasn't turbulence. That was assault. So what? Sapphira hissed. I pay my dues. You have to represent me. Section 4, Paragraph B of the Union Charter, Mike recited from memory. The Union is not obligated to provide legal counsel for criminal acts committed with malicious intent or gross negligence, resulting in severe bodily harm to a minor. Sapphira's stomach dropped. What are you saying? I'm saying we are cutting you loose, Sapphira, Mike said. We issued a statement 5 minutes ago condemning your actions and supporting the new ownership's decision to terminate you. If we defend you, we lose credibility with the new boss. And frankly, you aren't worth it. You can't do this, Sapphira shrieked. I have rights. You had a job, Mike said. You broke a kid's face. Goodbye, Sapphira. Click. The dial tone hummed in her ear. She was alone. Truly alone. Meanwhile, across London, in a private suite at the Dorchester Hotel, Michael Thorne sat in a velvet armchair. Leo was asleep in the bedroom, heavily medicated with painkillers, a temporary cap on his broken tooth. Sitting across from Michael was a woman in a sharp white suit. Her name was Elizabeth Sterling. She was known in London legal circles as the Viper. She didn't defend criminals, she destroyed them. The police are charging her with assault occasioning actual bodily harm, Elizabeth said, sipping her tea. She'll likely get a suspended sentence and a fine, given it's a first offence. The UK courts can be soft. Michael swirled the whiskey in his glass. I don't care about the criminal charges. The police can do what they want. I want to talk about the civil side. Elizabeth smiled, a razor-thin expression. You want to sue her? No, Michael said. I want to obliterate her. He placed a folder on the table. I want to sue her for emotional distress, medical expenses, and loss of enjoyment of life on behalf of my son. But I also want to sue her for defamation. She lied to the police. She claimed I assaulted her. That is a lie that could have cost me my freedom. She has no money, Michael, Elizabeth noted. She's a flight attendant, even a senior one. We'll bankrupt her in legal fees before we even get to a verdict. Exactly, Michael said, his eyes hard. I don't want her money. I want her future. I want a judgment against her so large that she will never have a credit score again. I want her wages garnished until she is 90. I want her to know that every time she buys a loaf of bread, she has to ask my permission first. Elizabeth opened her briefcase. I'll have the papers served to her in her cell. Sapphira was released on bail 24 hours later. She looked like a ghost. Her uniform was stained. Her hair was a mess. She walked out of the police station, expecting to hail a cab and go to a hotel. She just wanted to sleep. She figured she would fly back to New York using her employee pass, surely the system hadn't updated yet, and hide in her apartment in Queens until this blew over. She stepped onto the sidewalk. Flash, flash, flash. A wall of cameras blinded her. A sea of microphones was shoved into her face. Ms. Miller, why did you break the boy's tooth? Ms. Miller, do you hate children? Sapphira, look here. Is it true you called the police on the father to cover it up? Sapphira shielded her eyes, terrified. Get away from me. No comment. She pushed through the crowd, desperate. How did they know? Who told the press? She managed to flag down a black cab. Hilton Hotel, she gasped, slamming the door. She pulled out her phone. It had 400 missed messages. She opened Twitter, X. The #1 trending topic in the United States and the UK was SkyWings monster. She clicked the hashtag. There it was, the video, the clear, high-definition footage of her shoving the cart into Leo's face. It had 50 million views. The comments were a landslide of hatred. Mouse User 1. Look at her face afterwards. She doesn't even care. Lock her up. User 2. She tried to frame the dad. That is evil. Fresh User 3. I flew with her last year. She was rude to my grandmother. Karma is coming. Sapphira felt like she couldn't breathe. She arrived at the Hilton. She ran to the front desk. I need a room, she said, slapping her credit card on the counter. For 2 nights. The receptionist, a young woman, looked at Sapphira. Then she looked at the screen. Then she looked at Sapphira again. Her eyes widened. She recognized her from the news. I'm sorry, the receptionist said coldly. We are fully booked. The lobby is empty, Sapphira screamed. I have diamond status with Hilton. We have the right to refuse service, the receptionist said, sliding the card back. Please leave before I call security. Sapphira stumbled out into the London rain. She tried her bank card at an ATM. Transaction declined. She called her bank. Why is my card not working? Ms. Miller, the bank representative said, we received a legal freezing order regarding a pending civil litigation suit filed by Mr. Michael Thorne. Your assets are temporarily frozen pending a hearing. Frozen! Sapphira screamed at the ATM machine. I have $200 in cash. That's it. I'm sorry, ma'am. There is nothing I can do. Sapphira stood in the rain, soaked to the bone. She had no job. She had no union. She had no access to her money. She had no hotel. And she couldn't leave the country because the police had her passport. She sat on a bench near a bus stop, shivering. A group of teenagers walked by. One of them stopped. Hey, the kid said, pulling out his phone. That's her. That's the lady from the video. Oh my God, it is. Another kid laughed. He started filming her. Hey, Toothbreaker, how's it feel? Leave me alone, Sapphira yelled, covering her face. Smile for TikTok. They laughed, circling her. Sapphira Miller, the woman who had spent 15 years looking down on people, was now the lowest person in the city. But the final nail in the coffin hadn't even been hammered in yet. Back in New York, Michael Thorne was holding a press conference. He stood at a podium with the SkyWings logo behind him. But the logo was different. It was being taken down. Workers were behind him, physically removing the SkyWings sign. SkyWings has had a culture of toxicity for too long, Michael said into the microphones. A culture where paying passengers are treated like cattle, and where staff like Sapphira Miller believe they are above the law. He looked directly into the camera. Today, I am announcing that SkyWings is ceasing operations as a brand. We are rebranding, we are restructuring, and we are purging. Every single flight crew member will undergo a psychological evaluation. If you do not have the empathy to care for a child, you will not work for my airline. He paused. And to Ms. Miller, who is currently stranded in London, I have instructed our legal team to reject any settlement. We are going to trial. I want the world to see exactly who you are. Sapphira watched the press conference through the window of an electronics store, shivering in the cold. She saw the man she had threatened. She saw the power he held. She realized then that she hadn't just broken a tooth. She had broken the wrong person. And now, the pieces of her life were too shattered to ever be glued back together. The Royal Courts of Justice on the Strand in London is a building designed to make you feel small. Its Gothic stone arches and echoing corridors whisper of centuries of judgment. For Sapphira Miller, Standing in the dock of courtroom 4, the building felt like a tomb. It had been 6 months since Flight 492 touched down. 6 months of legal purgatory. Sapphira looked nothing like the polished, imperious flight attendant who had sneered at passengers in first class. Her SkyWings uniform, once her armor, had been stripped from her. She wore a charcoal suit purchased from a discount rack that bunched at the shoulders. Her hair, usually dyed a vibrant, expensive blonde, was showing inches of dark grey roots. Her skin was sallow, the result of a diet of cheap instant noodles and sleepless nights. She gripped the wooden railing of the dock, her knuckles white. She dared to glance at the public gallery. It was packed. The story of the SkyWings monster had gone viral globally, and the public wanted blood. But Sapphira only saw 2 people. In the front row sat Michael Thorne. He wore a simple black sweater and dark jeans. He looked relaxed, almost bored, like a man waiting for a delayed train rather than the verdict of a high-profile assault case. Beside him sat Leo. The boy was playing with a Rubik's Cube, his focus intense. When he looked up, he smiled at his father. The smile was blindingly white. The broken tooth had been replaced with a state-of-the-art ceramic implant, indistinguishable from the real thing. "All rise," the usher bellowed. The Honourable Justice Harrington swept into the room, his red robes flowing. He was an older man, with a face carved from granite and eyes that missed nothing. He took his seat, adjusted his spectacles, and looked directly at Sapphira. "Be seated," he commanded. Sapphira sat, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Please," she begged silently. "I can't go to prison. I'll die in there." Her defense lawyer, a court-appointed solicitor named Mr. Higgins, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, stood up. "My lord," Higgins began, his voice weary. "Ms. Miller is a woman of 45, with no prior criminal record. She has lost her career. She has been vilified in the global press. She is destitute. We ask the court to view the incident not as a malicious attack, but as a momentary lapse of judgment in a high-stress environment." She did not intend to hurt the child. Elizabeth Sterling, Michael's lawyer, stood up slowly. She moved with the lethal grace of a predator. "A lapse of judgment?" Elizabeth's voice was smooth, carrying to the back of the room without effort. "My lord, the defense forgets the evidence presented on day 2. Elizabeth pressed a button, and the large screens in the courtroom flickered to life. It was the video. Again. The silence in the room was absolute as the footage played. The kick of the brake, the violent shove, the impact, the scream. "Pause," Elizabeth commanded. The screen froze on Sapphira's face immediately after the impact. "Look at her face, my lord," Elizabeth said, pointing a manicured finger. "There is no shock. There is no horror. There is annoyance. She wasn't sorry she hurt a child. She was annoyed that the child had inconvenienced her." Elizabeth turned to Sapphira. "And let us not forget, Miss Miller, that you didn't call for a doctor. You called the police. You tried to have the father arrested. You tried to frame the victims. That is not negligence. That is malice." Sapphira looked down at her hands. She wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that she was just doing her job, that they shouldn't have been standing there. But she knew nobody was listening. Justice Harrington cleared his throat. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Sapphira Miller, please stand." Sapphira stood on shaking legs. The room spun slightly. "I have heard the arguments," Justice Harrington said, his voice grave. "You have been found guilty of assault occasioning actual bodily harm, but what troubles this court more than the physical injury is the callousness of your character. You held a position of trust and safety, and you weaponized it. Sapphira closed her eyes, tears leaking out. For the criminal charge, the justice continued, I am sentencing you to 12 months in prison. A gasp went through the gallery. Sapphira's knees buckled, and she grabbed the rail to stay upright. No. No, please. However, the justice raised a hand. Given your lack of prior convictions and the overcrowding of our correctional facilities, this sentence is suspended for 2 years. Sapphira let out a sob of pure, unadulterated relief. Air rushed back into her lungs. Suspended. She wasn't going to jail. She was free. She could go back to New York. She could start over. A hysterical giggle bubbled in her throat. I am not finished, Justice Harrington said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. While you will not serve time behind bars, you must pay for the damage you have caused. We move now to the civil suit of Thorne versus Miller. The justice picked up a thick document. Mr. Thorne has not requested damages for himself. He has requested punitive damages for the emotional distress of his son and for the defamation of character you inflicted upon them. This court rules in favor of the plaintiff. Sapphira wiped her eyes. Fine, she thought. I have no money. Bankruptcy will clear it in 7 years. I can handle that. The court orders you to pay the sum of $2.4 million, $3.1 million USD, the justice read. Sapphira blinked. It was a number so large it didn't feel real. I am aware, the justice said, looking over his glasses, that you do not possess these funds. Therefore, I am granting a global attachment order to your future earnings. This is a binding international order. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. For as long as you work, Miss Miller, whether in the UK, the US, or anywhere on Earth, 40% of your gross income will be automatically garnished and transferred to the Leo Thorne Foundation for Pediatric Dentistry. You will not be able to take out a loan. You will not be able to secure a mortgage. You will be placed on a strict living allowance. The justice paused to let the weight of his words settle. You broke a smile, Miss Miller. Now you will spend the rest of your life working to fix the smiles of strangers. You are dismissed. The gavel came down. Bang! Sapphira stood there, frozen. She wasn't going to jail, but she had just been sentenced to life as a servant. She looked across the room. Michael Thorne stood up. He didn't smile at her. He didn't gloat. He simply buttoned his jacket, took Leo's hand, and walked out without giving her a second glance. He had already forgotten her. She was no longer an enemy. She was just a line item in his bank ledger. 3 years later, the fluorescent lights of Sal's 24-hour diner in Queens flickered with an annoying buzz. The air smelled of burnt grease, stale coffee, and despair. Order up! Table 6! The cook screamed from the kitchen, ringing the bell aggressively. I got it! Sapphira yelled back, her voice raspy. Sapphira Miller, now 48, looked 60. Her back ached constantly. Her feet, swollen in cheap, non-slip shoes, throbbed with every step. She wore a stained yellow apron over a white t-shirt that had seen better days. She grabbed the 2 plates of greasy eggs and limped over to table 6. About time, the customer grumbled. He was a young man in a suit, typing furiously on his phone. He didn't even look up at her. I have a flight to catch in 2 hours. Chop, chop. Sorry, sir, Sapphira mumbled, placing the plates down. Coffee, the man snapped, shaking his empty cup. Sapphira trudged back to the pot. As she poured the coffee, she glanced at the newspaper the man had left open on the table. A full-page advertisement stared back at her. The background was a sleek, jet black fuselage with gold lettering. Obsidian Air, the new standard of luxury. And there, in the center of the ad, was the CEO, Michael Thorne. He was shaking hands with the President of the United States. Standing next to him was his son, Leo, now 10 years old. Leo was holding a trophy. He had just won a national robotics competition, sponsored by the airline. Leo's smile in the photo was radiant, perfect. Sapphira felt a vibration in her pocket. It was her phone, a notification from her bank app. Deposit alert. Wages received, 680 euros. Automatic deduction. Court order no 492B. 272 euros. Remaining balance, 408 euros. Sapphira stared at the screen. $408 for 2 weeks of work. That had to cover her rent for the basement room she rented in Astoria, her bus fare, and her food. There would be nothing left. Again. "Hey, waitress!" the man in the suit barked. "I said I have a flight to catch. Bring the check." Sapphira looked at the ad one last time. She looked at Michael, the man she had tried to bully because he wore a hoodie. She looked at Leo, the boy whose pain she had ignored. She realized then that her prison wasn't made of bars. It was made of consequences. Every plate she carried, every floor she mopped, every dollar she earned contributed to the legacy of the man she had tried to destroy. She ripped the check off her pad. Her hands shook, arthritis setting in early from the hard labor. "Here you go, sir," she said softly. The man threw a credit card on the table. It was a heavy, black metal card, the Obsidian Air Elite card. "Run it," he said dismissively, "and keep the change. You look like you need it." Sapphira took the card. It was cold in her hand. She walked to the register, swiped the card of the airline that ruined her, and watched the approval screen flash green. She looked out the window at the grey New York skyline. High above, a silver jet cut through the clouds, soaring toward London, toward Paris, toward a world she used to own, but could no longer even afford to visit. Sapphira Miller wiped a crumb from the counter, bowed her head, and went back to work. Sapphira Miller learned the hard way that kindness costs nothing, but cruelty can cost you everything. She judged a book by its cover, and in doing so, she wrote the final chapter of her own career. Michael Thorne proved that true power isn't about shouting or bullying. It's about protecting the ones you love and standing up for what's right. Sapphira didn't just break a tooth that day. She broke her own future. It's a brutal reminder. Treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO, because you never know who you're really talking to. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story about arrogant people getting exactly what they deserve. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.